Okay, this is different than it has been. Okay, Grandma, I think we're on, but hold on, everybody. We need to adjust Grandma here. I don't know. Usually it's a square screen, and now it's the whole thing. So I don't know. Hold on, we're going to start it again. And normally it's been doing that's weird. I wonder, it's can you guys see us? I'm kind of confused. Let me get on and see what I can see, Grandma, really quick.
Is anybody out there?
Let's see.
If
Groups.
they are, text Holly real quick.
Okay, so it is showing. That's weird. It's not showing everything that I'm seeing on your screen, so I guess we'll just go with it. Just make sure you're straight. Okay. Haley says yes. Okay, it's weird because it's showing way more than it has.
Ask him if it's showing about the
Haley, I'm
same.
texting you. Crocker? Okay, it's supposed to say crooked. Okay, Grandma, let me just make one more little change. It's weird because I didn't change anything about this tripod, but it's like different. Okay, let me look at my Facebook and see what it says.
I think we all owe Holly a big vote of thanks for this. She leaves her family and takes the time, and good job, Holly.
Well, it's fun to be here. Okay, we're a little crooked, and I think we'll be... Okay. Okay, I think we're ready, Grandma.
Okay. Well, welcome to the big show. I wrote down a whole bunch of things to talk about this morning, and it was the sequence of us living in Tacoma and Portland and then moving to Pocatello. And I just couldn't get excited about it. And I decided it would be better to just launch into what I keep thinking about, and that is my own children. And then I'll go back and tell about the sequence in the next show probably or something. Anyway, the first child, as you all know, was Mark. And he was a very sweet baby, very well behaved. He was early. He walked at 9 months. He trained himself on the potty by the time he was 14 months. I don't think he liked the mess because he would use the bathroom. Anyway, I didn't have a potty chair. I just held him on the toilet, but he used it. He learned early. And when he was about 3 or 4, he was at least 4, maybe 4 and a half, we lived in Twin Falls in a little apartment. And one day he came out to the kitchen where I was working and said, "Mom, I taught Lori how to whistle," but I think he was still calling her Wooly at that time. Anyway, I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yes, now listen to this and she'll whistle." And then he went around the corner of the wall so that I couldn't see him, and she puckered up, and the whistle sounded like it was coming from behind the wall. And sure enough it was. But I acted really shocked and surprised and praised her and praised Mark. He was just always playing tricks. When we moved back to Pocatello, no, that was before we moved to Twin Falls. And Lori was only about 2 and a half, so he was 3 and a half or 4. And we lived out on Swisher Road. And one day he come in, they were outside playing, and he came in. "Lori Lou is dead. Wowie Woo is dead," is the way he said it. And I, "What?" she's in the road. So I ran up the street, and there was that little pink snowsuit laying by the side of the road, just limp. And I thought, she's gone. I ran up and picked her up, and she started to giggle, and Mark started to giggle. And Mark had done that as a joke.
Oh,
He was always pulling tricks on all of us. When he was,
trick.
when he was older, like 8, 9, 10, one night Doyle and I went out, and he didn't want us to go. He didn't like having a babysitter. And so when we came home later and went to bed. Well, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the alarm clock started to ring and ring and ring. I couldn't find it. I got down on my hands and knees, and he had stuck it way back under the dresser and set it to ring at 3 o'clock to get us up. So he was always playing tricks on us. We moved back to Pocatello from Twin when he was 5 and a half, and so he started school that fall. And that was very traumatic. He went with no problem for about 3 weeks, and then he quit. He would not go to school. I would have to literally take him to school and put him in the teacher's arms. And I told him, you have to go, it's the law. I don't think he knew what the law was, but I sure did. Anyway, it was just traumatic. I instantly started reading all these books about how to handle a child that wouldn't comply. One day I took him out and just put him on the bus, and the bus driver shut the door and went away. And I went over to the tree in the yard and put my head against it and just sobbed and cried. And a few years later, I found out that they were building houses all the way up Spalding. A few years later, I found out, one of the guys told Doyle, and he told me that all the construction workers heard the noise of Mark screaming and everything, and they all saw me standing at that tree crying my eyes out. He finally went to school because Doyle, did I tell that story? But no, okay. One morning, I was getting breakfast, and I went in to get Mark, and I don't feel good, I'm sick, I don't feel good, I can't go to school. And I went out in the kitchen and said, Doyle, Mark won't get up. He says he's sick. He isn't sick. And Doyle just got fire in his eye, and he started to get up from the table. And I said, now be calm, be nice, don't be mean to him, just talk him into it. Don't do anything to him, just talk him into it. He went in the bedroom, and there was a dead silence. I went over and listened at the door. There was not a single noise going on. No one was talking or anything. And I thought, what is he doing? And it wasn't very long till Mark came out with this sheepish grin on his face saying, what's for breakfast, Mom? And I went in the bedroom and looked, and Mark had these little yellow pajamas with little squares all over them that Doyle's mother, Virgie, had made for him. Those pajamas were all over the room in pieces about that big. Doyle went in there, didn't say a word to him, just helped him with his pajamas coming off, and just sat there and tore them to pieces. And Mark got dressed and went to school, and we didn't have any trouble after that. A few months later, I said, Mark, why wouldn't you go to school? You love school. Why wouldn't you go at first? He said, well, I went. I went for a long time. He went for 3 weeks. And he said, then I got one of your books out of the bookcase, and I couldn't read it, so I quit going. You made me go, but I wanted to quit going because I didn't learn to read. So I thought it was some big psychological problem that he would wrestle with all his life. It was a simple matter that it hadn't met his expectations.
I wanted to tell you, Grandma, Haley and Emily and Jenny and Preston and Wes and Jill and Emily and McCade and Logan are all watching. And Doug and Melanie and Bryce.
Well, hello everybody. I love you all. What else have I written?
Okay, you have 5 broke into the house.
Oh. When Mark was about he was older than 5. I think he was 6 and a half. And he ran around the neighborhood with some 8-year-old boys. Anyway, those boys and he left our house. We were on Spalding Lane, and the hill was undeveloped. And so these kids would explore all out in those hills, and Mark would go with them. Well, they went out in the hills. Do you want to go outside?
I know, he doesn't follow me out.
What a bother. Anyway, there was a house out there, a little cement house that looked old. And one day they were exploring up there and they broke into that house. I don't know how they got in. Doyle and I went up there later to look. Anyway, the first thing we knew, the police were calling us saying, "We have your son." And we about died, our little boy. And so these were the days when kids could go off and play all day and you didn't really worry about them. Anyway, they charged him with breaking and entering, and we had to go to court. I just was so afraid he was going to be a criminal forever. Anyway, we went to court, and the judge said, well, the other boys are 3 years older than him, and we aren't going to put any of the blame on him, but your insurance, your homeowners will have to pay. And he said this gentleman that lived there had a suit hanging on the wall, $250 suit, and the boys smeared ketchup and mustard on it. And this man was on his honeymoon in Hawaii. He was gone when the boys went in. And I never could believe that he didn't take his $250 suit to Hawaii. Judging from the house, the guy had nothing. There was a refrigerator in the kitchen and a little table and 2 chairs, and that's about all in the whole place. He was just camping in there. Anyway, that was our only experience with the court, thank goodness.
Bicycle at 5.
Oh, this is when Mark was just 5. We lived in Twin, and one day he come running in the house and said, "Mom, come and see what I can do." And I went out there, and there was this full-size boy's bicycle, and he rode it. He hung on to the handlebars, leaned over and put that foot on the pedal, and put his foot through the you know what I mean? Put his other foot through there and pedaled, and he rode that bike up and down the street for me. I couldn't believe it. He was very coordinated, and when he got older, he loved to ski. He absolutely adored skiing, and he went up all the time, every time he ever could. And he also liked swimming, and he ended up on the Pocatello swim team when he was in high school. He liked karate. That got to be the big thing for a while. He earned a black belt in karate, and when he moved away to Nampa, he started a karate school. He rented a building and had boys come and learn karate, and girls. That's how he met his wife, Stacy. She came and took karate. Anyway, when at Mark's funeral, years later, this man came up to me. He was in his 20s. And he said, "Did you know that your son helped a lot of people get off drugs?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I know of at least 10 or 12 guys that he helped get off drugs. And they became drug-free." And I had never known that. Now, I wrote some things about high school. Or what's the next?
You have Good to Sisters.
Oh, yeah, Mark he was a tease. And I think he terrorized Debbie once in a while, but he was good to him. What else?
Doug, 62.
Oh, Doug was born when Mark was 8. And he was so proud that we let him go to the hospital with us to get the baby. And he carried the baby out of the hospital and all the way home. And he thought that was really neat. And he always was really tender and caring with Doug. He just adored Doug.
Okay, you told about no school and the alarm clock. So I think we got all of those. And then you have 14 pipe mover.
Okay, when he was 14, he begged Doyle to get him a job with Floyd Johnson. It wasn't Floyd, it was Floyd's brother, Al Johnson. And irrigation, they had pipelines. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. And they needed young men to go out in the fields and move the pipes to the next station. And it was dirty, hard work. And they had to go twice a day at 5 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. It was heavy work. And Doyle said, okay, I will get you the job, Mark, but you have to stay with it. If I get you on with Al, you've got to finish the summer. You've got to work the whole summer. And the way they paid those boys, they paid them like half of their salary. And then if they completed the summer, clear till they didn't need them anymore, they'd give them more money. And so Doyle said, you're not going to quit. It's dirty, hard work, so you think about it. Yes, I want a job. And so Doyle got him the job, and he would get up in the morning at 5 and ride his bicycle 2 or 3 miles out to the Johnson farm and move pipe. Come home about 8 in the morning, muddy and tired, and he'd eat and I don't know what, maybe sleep a little, I don't know. But he stuck with it. He wanted to quit after 3 weeks. And Doyle said, you're not quitting. Anyway, we'd put a wheelbarrow in the backyard, and he would fill it with water and souse his clothes up and down to get the mud off before we'd put them in the washer. We called him the dirty, rotten pipe mover, which he thought was funny. Anyway, Mark was always really good with his money. And he bought a piece of property up at Pebble at the ski area, a building lot. And he was paying on it, I think it was $1,400 or something. He paid on it all summer. Anyway, he paid on it for a couple of years, and then he lost interest. He moved away. He didn't want to do it anymore. And Doyle and I thought, we don't want a lot up there, which was stupid. It got worth a lot of money. So we let it go. Anyway, we should have paid for it. Sammy is nagging me. I'm going to go let him out, and I'll have Holly show you these pictures. Mark was in a contest when he was 13 months old and won the beauty contest. Come on, Sammy, let's go out. Come on.
It says Mark is let's see if I can hold it still and read. Mark is the 13-month-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Doyle R. Chatterton. He weighs 22 pounds, has brown hair and brown eyes. His grandparents are Mr. and Mrs. Howard Gardner and Mr. and Mrs. Leroy Steele. So he is pretty cute. And here's a couple other pictures. It's first grade. Looks like Shiloh there. Let's see where we're going. Just run through. I'll post these. I'll take pictures and post them too.
Okay, I left the door open so he could come back in without barking. Okay, so when Mark was in high school, he was on the swim team. I have to tell you though, before he got into high school, when he was about 12 years old, am I on there, Holly?
Yes.
All the kids would go to primary in the neighborhood. And so he and the girls went to primary. One day Mark come home and said, Mom, why aren't we going to church? We're not even on their roll over there. They don't even know us. we should be going to church. And Doyle and I talked about it and thought, yes, we owe it to the kids to take them to church. They need to have a little religious education. And so we started taking them to church. And then on January 1st, and I don't know how much longer that was, on January 1st, we quit everything. He quit smoking, we quit everything, and started going to church. And of course the church was delighted. Here was a husband and wife and 5 darling little kids. And so they told us that they invited us to go to the temple preparation classes. So we went to them. And I don't know, they were a few weeks long. We started church in January, and in May, the middle of May somewhere, we went through the temple. And it wasn't enough. Doyle always believed in the church. He always had a testimony at the church. I didn't. I wasn't raised a Mormon, and I didn't have that testimony. But I believed in God and Jesus, and I thought that we should go to church. So we went to church. We went from one life to a new life, which was better life, and went to everything. We did everything they said. And we only went back to the temple once. I think that was one of our mistakes. After a couple of years, Doyle said, I do not want to do this anymore. I don't like it. I hate having to be there every Sunday, and I'm afraid they're going to make me a bishop, and I don't want to be there. And I said, okay. And we quit. Now, looking back, I wish so badly I had said, okay, but I'm going to continue. I'm going to take the kids. Maybe he would have followed me back in, I don't know. And so that was in 1965 when we went through the temple. And then we were active 2 or 3 years, I don't know how long. And then we quit. And we didn't go back to the temple until 2003. So it was like 37 or something years later. Anyway, I wanted to tell you this because Mark is the motivator that got us to go. And then from the time we quit, I wanted to go and nagged about it, and finally said, if you don't shut up about that, I'm going to run away. He didn't run away. And I probably didn't shut up. I don't know. Anyway, what else have I got about Mark? That was about all.
Let's see, yeah.
Okay, then.
Not much dating.
No, he didn't date.
Kansas City plumber.
Okay, that's what I'll tell now.
You have skis. Did you say?
Oh,
you said he likes to ski.
He
but did
skied
you?
a lot.
Okay, but no specific story.
Okay.
Okay.
So then he got out of high school. He graduated high school. And about a year before that, Peggy's son, Steve, had moved to Pocatello and was going to ISU. Well, Steve had gotten involved in karate. That's where Mark learned the karate. And so his teacher, Tom Ray, who was 3 or 4 years older, Mark was 18, Steve was 19, and Tom was 23 or 4, I don't know how old. And so Tom moved to Pocatello too and got a job cooking in a restaurant. Steve was going to ISU. Every night they'd get together and teach Mark, and Tom would teach the two of them karate. And Tom was kind of weird, and I felt like it was a cult. And they did what Tom said in their lives, not just the karate. Anyway, Tom thought that they could get work in Kansas City. And so they left and drove out to Kansas and tried to find work, and I don't know what all they were doing. Anyway, Mark called me a couple of months later. This was in the summer after he got graduated. And he said, Mom, I need to come home. We're starving to death. So Western Union, I wired him $75 to come home on. And just a side note, it was expensive. It cost like $20 to send him that 75. Now you can just call a bank and transfer money. Anyway, he came home and he had to spend the night in Denver, where the plane went down and then came back. He had to spend the night in one of those airliner seats with the arms on it. He couldn't lay down. And when he got home, he was miserable, hungry, and pretty much broke. Anyway, Neil by then, or was Dad still? Dad was still alive. Dad was still in the plumbing shop. And he hired Mark as a plumber. And so Mark started an apprenticeship as a plumber, which, you know, my dad owned the plumbing shop. Anyway, Tom and Steve moved to Nampa. And Mark worked here for probably a year, and he was in the plumbers union. And they wanted him to come to Nampa, so he went to Nampa. And it turned out he was the only one with a job. So he was pretty much supporting the whole thing. By then, Tom had gotten married and had a wife, and they lived upstairs, and Steve and Mark had bedrooms downstairs. So that went on for quite a while. And then Mark he finished his apprenticeship 4 years and wanted to become a pipe fitter, which was a step higher. And so he went to pipe fitting school and learned how to do that. And he told me one day that he could make a weld, and then they'd come along and x-ray him after they made the welds. 98% accurate, which was really high and good. He was a good worker. So then Mark started booming, what they call booming. But before he did that, let me back up. Stacy was 14 when she started karate, and Mark was 18, 19. And so she told her mom that she met the man she was going to marry. So she was 14 years old. And I remember she came to Pocatello once. A bunch of the karate kids came. They were in a karate something or other. And that's when I met Stacy, a very cute young little girl. Anyway, back to Nampa they went. And when she got out of high school, or I don't know how old she was, she could tell you, they started dating. And finally, he proposed. And I think by then she was 19 or 20, I don't know. And she told him it was either Steve and Tom in that life or her, that he couldn't do both. And he chose her, thank God. Anyway, she called me up one day and said, well, your rotten son finally proposed. And I said, oh, really? And she, congratulations, welcome to the family. She said, yes, let me tell you what he said. He said, I won't be with you very long, but I will leave you plenty of money so that you don't have to go to work and leave my kids at home. And when you go to choose a new husband, I'll be looking over your shoulder because I want you to get somebody that'll be good to my kids. And she laughed and said, can you imagine that? And I said, I sure can. He's been telling me since he was a very small child that he wouldn't live very long. He said he was an old soul, didn't need to be here very long. And we both ha about it, you know. And that was they got married on our anniversary, May 3rd. And what year would it be?
Well,
I can't pinpoint.
I was born in 1980, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's about right.
If I was a baby.
That's about right, because Mark died in 83. So Mark was 26 years old and born in 54, so you can figure it out, 1980. Anyway, they got married, and I was so happy. Mark, he was 26. I just felt like he needed to get a wife and a house and a mortgage and settle down. And he already owned a house. But anyway, that's what he did. They got married, and I was so glad. I just loved Stacy. Anyway, they got married, and a year and 6 days later, they had Shiloh, May 9th the next year. And when she was not very old, they had Josh. So she was about 2.5, and Josh was 1.5. And they lived in Montana, where he was on a job, a steam fitter job. And he had bought a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom trailer house, and they pulled that up there. He had a new truck. Everything that Mark bought, the appliances, the truck, the house, the trailer house, everything he bought, he put that insurance on it that would pay if he died, because he still thought he was going to die young. Anyway, they were in Montana, and on Labor Day in 1983, Doyle and I went to Jackson Hole for Labor Day. And when we came home on Sunday night, we went to work. Oh, it was Labor Day. No, we went to work Tuesday morning. And Tuesday night at 1:30 in the morning, Stacy called and woke me up, and I ran out to the kitchen and got the phone. She says, Dorothy, Mark, and Dennis DeCardaville went fishing, and the boat swamped somehow, and they both went into the water. Mark did not come out of the water. And I said, oh, Stacy, you know Mark. He's sitting 5 miles downstream laughing his head off at the joke he's pulling. She said, no, Dorothy, you don't understand. The police are here. They're dragging the river. It was a Swan Falls Dam out of Boise. And there were cliffs, and the river was at the bottom. And they had made that river, they had a reservoir. And it covered up a lot of big rocks and tall pine trees and everything. And the state police thought that when the boat went down, that Mark went down into the water and hit his head on something, because his head was wounded. Anyway, I finally believed her and yelled at Doyle, screamed at Doyle, and he came in and talked to her. And it was awful. I begged with God to take me and put him back. He needed to be there for his little kids. Stacy was 4 months along. I don't know if I said that. So they couldn't find his body. And so for 6 days they drug the river looking. And Doyle and I went to, be there. And I've got pictures of us up on the cliff with the little kids. Not in that book, it's in this one right here. Anyway, we would stay up there and watch the kids and watch them drag the river. And then we went back home. I mean, I'd only been on my job 6 months. It starts there. Okay. And then there's a few pages of it. Anyway, so 6 days later, well, the next Monday, or Tuesday, I don't know, we went back to work, and about noon, I went in and told my manager, I said, I'm sorry, I cannot stay at work. And she said, yeah, I understand. Go ahead and go home. I went back to my desk to get stuff in my purse, and the phone rang, and it was Stacy, I guess, I don't know who called me, and they had found Mark. After 6 days, the body comes to the top. It fills up with gases. So we dropped everything and went back to Nampa, and the funeral was on Thursday, 2 days later. And it was awful, and not having much of a testimony. And I think I told you earlier that my dad always said, there isn't any heaven, there isn't any hell. When you're dead, you're dead. And I just felt Mark had just gone out into the void and was gone, didn't exist anymore. And then I'd try to talk myself into afterlife, and I'd be okay for a while. No. Anyway, it was very hard. And I had started work at AMI in February that year. I worked on the switchboard and as a greeter when people came in. What do you call them? I don't know. And then the insurance job came up, and I bid on it. and went in and interviewed, and I told them I thought I'd be good because the employees were all younger than me and they would feel like I was a mom figure. I don't know if that's what got me the job or not, but I got the job. And I started the job on Monday, and then the next Monday was Labor Day. So I was on the job 1 week, and then he died, and I was off for 2 weeks. And then I went back to work, and it was so hard. I'd work all day, and you know, you just have to put your feelings on a shelf. And then I'd get in the car at night and sob all the way home, cry all night. It was hard. Anyway, where was I going from here? I gotta get off that subject. How long has it been, Holly? What time is it?
It is. I can't tell what time it is.
That clock's.
It's 6:36.
So we've been talking about a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will go on then because the story you all know so well is coming up.
Grandma, before you go on, I want to ask, unless you're going to talk about this, but what are some things, like, were there any moments that you know, felt that comfort, or things you learned during that time, or maybe some advice or what you learned on how we can deal with tragedy in our own lives, you know? Something
Well,
along that
one
line.
thing I would say is that you have to let your feelings be there. You can't just push it down and say, oh, I'm okay, which I did all day, but I'd go home at night and cry. And I would go back and forth about whether there was heaven or not. Doyle totally knew he was in heaven and that, you know, he was being taken care of. And so a few days after Mark drowned, Jenny came to me and said that Mark had visited her in the night and asked her to help take care of his boys. And he said boys, plural. Well, Stacy was pregnant. She didn't do ultrasound and we didn't know what it was. And it was a boy. So I took that as a sign, you know, that he, anyway, a few years later, I dreamed that Mark was suddenly at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see him. I didn't hear any voice, but he told me, he said, I'm a teacher. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. And I got up and went in the bathroom and cried. And then I came back to bed, and just when I laid down, I realized there was a block of light, a rectangle, down by the side of the bed. And I, what? And it raised up and came over and settled on me. And I felt so comforted. I know it was the Holy Ghost at work. Anyway.
And how many years after that was it?
A few, I don't know, 4 or 5, or I've written it all out. It's all written. We can put it on the post if you want it.
Okay.
Anyway, the next, I know y'all are all watching this to see Grandma blow her nose. Anyway, the next incident or the next thing that happened is that Lori had a dream. And it was, she could tell you how many years, I don't know. It wasn't immediately. But she dreamed that she heard a noise in her kitchen. She went downstairs and there was Mark. And he was holding 2 babies in his arms. And he said, Lori, you need to take care of these babies. And he laid them on the counter. And she could see the one in the blue blanket. She could see his face. And he looked just like her other boys, her other 8 boys. And so it got to be, I don't know when she had the dream, winter, summer. Anyway, at Christmas that year, she and her partner in business were shopping in the mall. And there was this sign that says, fetal photos. Have your fetal photo taken here. And Lori thought, okay. She had gotten the hiccups a night or 2 before, but the hiccups were here and here. There wasn't just one hiccup. And so she went in and got the ultrasound, and it was 2 babies. One was a boy, one was a girl. And so she went and bought some girls, a little girl's thing and a little boy's outfit, and took them home. Gave them to Dale. And he's, what? Anyway, it was sure enough twins when they were born. Anyway, Lori called me up the next day after that dream and said, Mark came, he laid the babies down and left. And I thought that was nice, you know. But I was hoping she wouldn't have any more babies. I wanted her to last a long time, and I thought if she had too many babies, she wouldn't last that long. I want her to outlive me. They all better outlive me. Anyway, she called me again. I was at work when both of these calls came. She called me again and said, Mom, you know, I told you Mark brought me 2 babies. Yeah. Well, he really did. I'm having twins, a boy and a girl. I said, oh, Lori, when are they due? And she said February 17th. And I said, Lori, if you have those babies on Mark's birthday, I will never doubt again that there's a heaven. And February 3rd, my phone rang on my desk. I pick it up. It's Lori. She says, Mom, I had my babies at 3 o'clock this morning. So she had them on Mark's birthday, and I thought, it has to be. This isn't coincidence. It has to be. And so I really gained some testimony then. And then I racked up my nagging to go back to church quite higher. Anyway, we still didn't go. That was in 83, and we didn't start back until 2003. And, you know, the kids all went, all but Mark. Mark quit with us. But the girls went, Lori and Debbie. And then when Jenny got out of high school, she started going, and Doug did the same thing. And I'll tell you that when I tell their stories. But anyway, all of that did build some testimony, and I started reading the Book of Mormon and kind of preparing. I remember my Relief Society teachers came every week or month, and I would tell them how much I wanted to go back to church. Maybe I should have started going without him, but I felt like he was the priesthood holder, and I'm the wife, and I should let him be the lead, so I didn't do it until he finally said, okay, let's go to church. And I'll tell that story another day. Now, you asked me something and I didn't answer. How did that strengthen me? After a while, you stop the actual grieving, and whenever you start getting those horrible feelings, I would think, but look what he left, look what I have. I got to see him as a full-grown man, which he didn't think that would happen. He thought he was going to die earlier than that. They were married 3.5 years when he drowned. Well, 3 years in May to September. Anyway, so he told her the truth when he said, I won't be with you very long. It was hard. But after a while, I started looking at what I had instead of what I lost. And the biggest thing I felt like we had was that we had Stacy. And Stacy was a girl who would share her children with Grandma and Grandpa. I've known people that had to go to court in order to be able to see their grandchildren. So, Stacy, I love you dearly for that. And we went to Nampa and stayed right with her and, you know, took the kids to the park and did things with them. And they came here at least every summer. And they still try to come at least once a year, which I appreciate because I can't really go up there now with my eyes the way they are.
That is really neat. You have on here Stacy proposal
I told
which
that
you
he
did talk about,
proposed.
and then 3 lovely children.
They are lovely. You guys are lovely, and those little twins are lovely, and Madison and all of them.
Doug has a question. He says, how was Stacy's birth of Zach regarding Mark? Did she feel like he was there?
Stacy, give us a text. Can you answer that question? When you had Zach, did you feel Mark was there? I'll tell you what I felt. And I felt like, and I still kind of halfway believe it, that when Mark died, and she was only 4 months along, that he and Zach were together in the pre-life. He was in the pre-life, Mark was in the afterlife. But that Mark talked to him about the church and about the gospel and everything. But an experience like that, I hope none of you kids ever have to lose a child. It is so hard. It's the hardest thing in the world, I think, more than losing a spouse, really, because they're your flesh and blood. But anyway, you just have to get through it. One thing I learned when I was doing the grieving and all that is that your emotional pain is as bad as physical pain or worse. One night when I was crying, I felt like my heart broke. I felt like it actually broke in two. So it was hard.
Yeah. Emily asked, has he visited you since then in any dreams?
No. Oh, yes. Yes. In my dream, I was in Nampa, and we were at a church supper. They had a church supper after Mark's funeral. Bobby, Steve's wife, put it on. Anyway, I dreamed that we were at this church supper, and Lori nudged me and said, "Look, Mom, Mark just came in." And I ran over to him and started kissing him and hugging him. And then I sat down and made him sit on my lap. I wanted to hold my baby. And he was clear up here, you know. But that was another dream that I had. And I dream about Mark occasionally. And it's always very comforting and very nice. I think I'm through.
Okay.
I'm sorry I got so emotional. This happened, 83. It's been, 33 years ago. But it's still fresh.
Yeah.
Still fresh.
For sure.
Yeah. You know, I don't think God gives us anything that we cannot handle. We just have to decide whether we're going to handle it or go nuts. When Mark died, Stacy told me one day, she said, you know, I wanted to just go sit down in a corner and howl. And then I thought, well, shall I do that or shall I feed the kids supper? Well, she fed the kids supper. But you do feel like that you just can't stand it. Mm-hmm. But the truth is you can stand it. You have to stand it. You have no choice. So, Mark was a hard one. I'm going to talk about each one of my children, Lori, Debbie, Jenny, Doug, but I won't take this long with each one. But Mark's story is, well, it's not finished because he's got those 3 wonderful kids and they have children. So, life goes on. Stacy married a wonderful man years later, and they've been very happy together, and I'm glad of that. And he was a military man, and then a policeman, and then when he came back from working in Iraq with the police there to teach them methods and stuff, when he came back, he didn't want to do the police work anymore. So he became a nurse, a registered nurse. So he's a good guy. I like him. Monty. Hi, Monty. Are we done?
Yep. Do you want to say anything else?
I want to say, vote. Every one of you, get out there and vote. I do care who you vote for, but you vote for who you want. But don't let it go by. We've got to win this election. And I will tell you that my family, I grew up a Democrat. My family was Democrat. My Aunt Liddy and Aunt Dean, oh, she was a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. She talked politics quite a bit. But I voted for Kennedy, and then I didn't like Johnson. And so I started listening to the talk radio and really looking at it, and I switched from Democrat to Republican. I felt like the Democrats wanted all this free lunch to be out there for everybody, and that's how they controlled the votes and controlled the people. And so I really went away from that and went to Republican. But you be whatever you want to be, but just vote. Well, on second thought, if you're going to vote for Hillary, stay home.
Right.
Bye, everybody.